Welcome to my channel. Try to hear the latest story.
My name is Archer, a 35-year-old software engineer from rural Michigan who finally made it big in Seattle's tech scene. At our monthly family dinner, my 7-year-old nephew Tyler pointed at my new Tesla and innocently announced, "Mommy says you borrowed that car from your boss to look important." Everyone snickered while my sister Megan feigned embarrassment. I just smiled and left without a word. That night she texted, "Don't forget the house payment is due." I replied simply, "Everything will be settled. Where are you watching from?" Hit that like and subscribe button if you've ever had family members try to diminish your success. I grew up in a small farming community outside of Grand Rapids, Michigan, where everyone knew each other's business and social status was measured by the age of your pickup truck and the size of your property. My sister Megan was 5 years older than me, and despite the age gap, we were close as children. We shared a cramped bedroom in our parents' modest 2-bedroom house until I was 8, when Dad converted part of the attic into a small room for me. Those early years forged what I thought was an unbreakable bond between us. Our parents, Thomas and Eleanor, worked themselves to exhaustion trying to provide for us. Dad managed the local hardware store 6 days a week, while Mom worked as a school secretary and cleaned houses on weekends. They never complained, but the financial strain was evident in the worn furniture, the careful meal planning, and the way Christmas gifts were always practical necessities rather than the toys other kids received. These circumstances shaped Megan and me very differently. While I became determined to create financial security through education and career advancement, Megan developed a fixation on appearances and social standing. She was pretty and popular in high school, dating Brad Thompson, whose family owned the largest car dealership in the county. Everyone expected great things from Megan. She was smart, charismatic, and driven by a desire to escape our family's modest circumstances. When Megan got pregnant at 19, her college plans at Michigan State derailed. She and Brad married quickly, and with help from his parents, they settled in a small starter home just 2 miles from where we grew up. What was supposed to be a temporary situation became permanent. Brad took a position at his family's dealership, and Megan found work as a receptionist at the local insurance office. Their son, Tyler, was born 7 months after their wedding. I was 15 when Megan's life took this turn, still focused on maintaining perfect grades and securing a scholarship that would take me far from our small town. Despite the physical distance that would eventually separate us, I promised Megan I'd always be there for her and Tyler. Then tragedy struck when I was 20. Our parents were killed in a multi-vehicle accident on the interstate during a blizzard. The loss was devastating, but it hit Megan particularly hard. 7 months pregnant with her second child at the time, she fell into a deep depression. Brad was ill-equipped to handle her emotional needs while managing their finances and caring for 3-year-old Tyler. The modest life insurance policy our parents had left was split between us. Instead of using my half to pay for college as they'd intended, I gave a significant portion to Megan and Brad for a down payment on a larger house. Their growing family needed stability, and I convinced myself that helping them was what Mom and Dad would have wanted. I worked 3 jobs simultaneously to put myself through community college, stocking shelves at the supermarket in the early mornings, answering phones at a local law firm during the day, and delivering pizzas at night. After 2 grueling years, I transferred to the University of Michigan to complete my computer science degree. Every holiday and summer break, I returned home to spend time with Megan's family, bringing gifts for the kids and helping with household projects Brad never seemed to find time for. After graduation, I landed an entry-level programming job at a small tech company in Detroit. The salary was modest, but it was a foot in the door of an industry I was passionate about. I lived in a studio apartment with second-hand furniture and drove a 15-year-old Honda Civic with nearly 200,000 miles on the odometer. Despite my tight budget, I never missed sending money for Tyler's birthday and Christmas presents, always labeled as being from his mom and dad. 3 years later, I accepted a position with a growing software company in Seattle. The substantial salary increase and relocation package represented the first real financial breathing room I'd ever experienced. Megan's reaction to my move was mixed. superficially supportive but undercut with comments like, "I hope it works out this time," and "Don't forget about us when you're living the high life." In Seattle, my career flourished. I worked 60-hour weeks, earned promotions, and eventually became a senior engineering manager, overseeing a team of 15 developers. My hard work paid off with stock options, bonuses, and a salary that finally reflected my expertise and dedication. Throughout these years, I maintained close ties with Megan's family, flying back for major holidays and sending generous gifts. When Brad's attempt to open a second dealership location failed, I loaned them $15,000 they never repaid. When their roof needed replacing, I covered the $8,000 bill. Most significantly, I contributed $900 monthly toward their mortgage for nearly 4 years, money Megan increasingly referred to as what we're owed rather than the gift it was. Despite my financial success and professional achievements, family gatherings became increasingly uncomfortable. Brad's parents, Judith and Howard, were pleasant enough but clearly viewed me as the family oddball who'd abandoned small-town values for city living. Brad's brother James and his wife Sarah were more welcoming, but even they seemed to accept Megan's carefully constructed narrative about my life. What I didn't understand until much later was how systematically Megan had been diminishing my accomplishments to maintain her status as the successful sibling who'd stayed true to her roots. While I was building a career through relentless effort and constant learning, she was building a fiction about my life that would ultimately unravel in the most painful way possible. The last Saturday in April was unseasonably warm in Michigan as I drove from my hotel to Megan and Brad's house for the monthly family dinner. After a particularly successful quarter at work, I'd finally treated myself to a Tesla Model S, midnight blue with the premium interior package. It was the first truly luxurious purchase I'd ever made, a tangible symbol of overcoming our childhood poverty and years of financial sacrifice. The neighborhood where Megan and Brad lived consisted of large, newer homes arranged around artificial ponds and small parks, the kind of upper-middle-class subdivision that had represented unattainable luxury to us as kids. Their 4-bedroom colonial with its manicured lawn and 3-car garage projected exactly the image of success Megan had always craved. I pulled into their curved driveway, parking behind Brad's father's Cadillac Escalade. My nephew Tyler was the first to spot me, racing out the front door in his socked feet despite his mother's calls to put on shoes. "Uncle Archer! Uncle Archer!" he shouted, his 7-year-old enthusiasm infectious as he skidded to a stop beside my car. "Whoa, is this yours? It's so cool." I climbed out, giving him the high five he eagerly awaited. "Hey, buddy. Yep, this is my new car. Just got it last month." Tyler circled the vehicle, mouth agape at the sleek design and distinctive logo. "Can we go for a ride later? Please?" "We'll see what your mom says," I replied, knowing Megan's likely response. I grabbed my overnight bag and the gifts I'd brought: a science kit for Tyler, a doll for his 4-year-old sister Emma, and an expensive bottle of scotch for Brad. The front door opened wider as Megan appeared, wearing a floral sundress and an expression that couldn't quite decide between welcoming and appraising. "Well, look who finally arrived," she called out with a tight smile. "We were beginning to think you might have gotten lost." "Flight was on time for once," I replied, climbing the porch steps to accept her brief, perfunctory hug. "Traffic from the airport wasn't bad either." "That's quite the rental car," she commented, her eyes darting to the Tesla and back to my face. "Not a rental," I corrected gently. "Finally bought something nice for myself." A flicker of something, surprise, annoyance, crossed her features before she masked it with a laugh. "Well, aren't you full of surprises? Come on in. Everyone's waiting." The house was filled with the familiar cacophony of family gathering, the baseball game blaring from the living room television, Emma's animated chatter as she played with her dolls on the floor, the clink of ice in drinks, and the aroma of Megan's signature pot roast wafting from the kitchen. Brad's parents were settled in the best spots on the sectional sofa. Howard, a heavy-set man with a permanent sunburn from golfing, raised his whiskey glass in greeting. Judith, thin and meticulously maintained with highlighted hair and carefully applied makeup, offered a cool smile. "There he is, the Seattle big shot," Brad called from the kitchen doorway, beer in hand. He'd gained weight since I'd last seen him 6 months ago, his once athletic frame now soft around the middle, his hairline receding more noticeably. "Hardly," I replied with a self-deprecating smile, having learned that humility was my best defense against their subtle digs. Just the same old me. Brad's brother James and his wife Sarah arrived moments later with their teenage daughter Zoe. Of all the extended family, they were the ones I genuinely enjoyed. James worked as an English teacher at the local high school and shared my love of science fiction. Sarah, a pediatric nurse, had a warmth and authenticity that stood in stark contrast to Megan's calculated social performance. "Archer, great to see you, man," James said, giving me a genuine hug. "How long are you in town?" "Just the weekend," I replied. "Have to be back for a big product launch on Tuesday." "Listen to him," Megan interjected with a laugh that contained no real humor. "Always so important and busy. Some things never change." I ignored the jab, having developed a thick skin over the years. We moved to the dining room where Megan had set the table with her best china and crystal, the expensive set I'd gifted them for their 10th anniversary. Emma was seated beside me, chattering about kindergarten and her dance classes. Tyler sat across from us, between his grandparents. The conversation flowed through the usual topics: local gossip, Brad's dealership sales, Howard's golf game, Judith's garden club politics, and carefully edited updates from my life in Seattle. I'd learned to share just enough about my work to be polite, without providing ammunition for Megan's subtle undermining. As we finished the main course and Megan began clearing plates for dessert, Tyler suddenly pointed toward the front window where my Tesla was visible in the driveway. "Mommy, can you explain again why Uncle Archer has that fancy car?" he asked with childlike innocence. "I forgot what you told me." The room grew quiet as all eyes turned to Megan, who froze momentarily before forcing a laugh. "Oh, Tyler, you're confused, sweetheart," she said lightly. "I just said Uncle Archer's car is very nice." But Tyler, with the persistence only a 7-year-old can muster, shook his head. "No, you told Daddy that Uncle Archer borrowed it from his boss to look important when he visits. You said his company lets employees pretend they own nice things." The silence that followed was deafening. Brad coughed uncomfortably while Howard poorly disguised a snort of laughter as a throat clearing. Judith's eyebrows rose as she exchanged glances with Sarah, whose face had flushed with second-hand embarrassment. "Kids say the darndest things," Brad finally offered, attempting to break the tension. "More wine, anyone?" But the damage was done. Around the table, I saw not shock or disbelief at this absurd claim, but knowing smiles and exchanged glances. They'd heard this narrative before. They believed it. In that moment, years of accumulated slights and dismissals crystallized into perfect clarity. My sister had been systematically undermining me to everyone, not just with subtle implications but with outright lies about my career, my character, and my success. Megan returned from the kitchen, her face a carefully constructed mask of embarrassment. "Tyler, honey, that's not exactly what Mommy said. Uncle Archer works very hard at his job. Now, who wants chocolate cake?" The swift change of subject might have worked if not for Emma's innocent follow-up. "But Mommy, you did say that. You said Uncle Archer pretends to be rich but really needs our help." Another wave of poorly concealed snickers circled the table. Brad shot Emma a warning look while Megan's face flushed red. I sat perfectly still, my expression neutral while internally processing this betrayal. I'd given them over $45,000 in the past 5 years alone. I'd sacrificed my own comfort, delayed my own life goals, all to support the sister who was now portraying me as some kind of fraud. "I think I should head out," I said quietly, folding my napkin and placing it beside my plate. "Early flight tomorrow." "Don't be ridiculous," Megan protested too quickly. "You haven't even had dessert." Tyler and Emma, apologize to your uncle for making up stories. The children looked confused and on the verge of tears, caught in their mother's web of lies. I wouldn't allow them to be blamed. "No apology necessary," I said, smiling reassuringly at them. "Kids just repeat what they hear, not their fault at all." I stood and thanked Megan for dinner, made my polite goodbyes to everyone, and walked out to my car with dignity intact. As I backed out of the driveway, I could see them gathered at the dining room window, no doubt already dissecting what had just happened through Megan's distorted lens. 3 hours later, as I sat in my hotel room reviewing work emails, my phone buzzed with a text from Megan. "Don't forget, the house payment is due on the 1st. An extra $200 would help with Emma's dance competition fees." The audacity was breathtaking. After allowing her family to laugh at me, after teaching her children to disrespect me, she still expected financial support. I stared at the message for a long time before typing my response. "Everything will be settled." She couldn't possibly understand the full meaning behind those 4 words. But she would, very soon. As I lay awake in my hotel room that night, memories of Megan's betrayals played through my mind like scenes from a disturbing movie. What had happened at dinner wasn't an isolated incident, but the culmination of years of systematic undermining. The first notable instance occurred when I landed my programming job in Detroit. At a family barbecue, I overheard Megan telling our elderly Aunt Patricia that I was just playing with computers all day. When Aunt Patricia expressed confusion about what that entailed, Megan laughed and said, "Honestly, I don't think anyone knows what he actually does. It's not like a real career like teaching or medicine." The dismissal stung, but I told myself she simply didn't understand the tech industry. 6 months later, when I invited the family to see my new apartment in Detroit's revitalized Midtown district, Megan spent the entire visit pointing out safety concerns and asking if I had good deadbolts. "This neighborhood seems transitional," she told Brad loudly enough for me to overhear. "I worry about Archer, living in such a dangerous area." The apartment was actually in one of the city's safest areas, near the university and medical center, but her comments planted seeds of concern with the rest of the family, who began questioning my judgment. When I was promoted to lead developer after just 18 months, nearly doubling my salary, Megan's response was telling. "Well, they must be desperate for people willing to work those hours," she commented when I shared the news over a family dinner. "I hope they're not just using you until someone with more experience comes along." What should have been a moment of celebration became an exercise in defending my capabilities. The most egregious example came when I took 3 months off between jobs to develop a fitness tracking app I'd been conceptualizing. I'd saved enough to support myself during this period and was excited about the entrepreneurial opportunity. Megan told everyone I was between jobs, her tone implying I'd been fired. When the app was completed, and I accepted a position at the Seattle company, she described it as me finally finding something after a period of unemployment. As my career in Seattle progressed, Megan's methods became more sophisticated. She began creating an alternate narrative about my life, one where my success was temporary, my accomplishments exaggerated, and my financial stability precarious. She referred to my apartment as tiny. It was nearly 1,200 square feet in one of Seattle's best neighborhoods. She described my job as stressful and probably not long-term. I'd been with the same company for 6 years with regular promotions. Most insidiously, she began suggesting to family members that I was struggling financially despite appearances. When I sent Tyler an expensive gaming system for Christmas, she told her in-laws that I'd charged it to credit cards I couldn't afford. When I paid for everyone's dinner at an upscale restaurant during a previous visit, she later told James and Sarah that I'd been showing off beyond my means. What I didn't discover until later was that Megan had been systematically lying about our financial relationship as well. Through casual conversations with James after the disastrous dinner, I learned that Megan had told everyone she'd been helping me out during tough times. The $45,000 I'd contributed to their house payments over 4 years? In her version, that was money she had loaned me during rough patches, which I was now repaying. The $15,000 I'd given for Brad's failed business expansion? Megan claimed that was money they had inherited from our parents that I had borrowed when I moved to Seattle and was slowly returning. The $8,000 for their roof? A generous gift from them when I couldn't afford to fix plumbing in my apartment. Each revelation was more painful than the last. The question that haunted me wasn't why Megan would construct such elaborate lies, but why I had allowed myself to be exploited for so long. The financial support I'd provided wasn't just generous, it was excessive to the point of self-sabotage. While making their house payments, I'd delayed buying my own home. While funding Brad's business venture, I'd postponed investing in my retirement accounts. While covering their emergencies, I'd worked overtime and sacrificed my own comfort. The psychological toll was even greater than the financial one. For years, I'd endured subtle jabs and dismissive comments, always making excuses for Megan's behavior. She doesn't understand my industry. She's insecure about her own choices. She's under pressure from Brad's status-conscious family. Each time I visited, I observed how Megan worked to maintain her image as the successful sibling who had stayed true to their hometown values, while I was portrayed as the somewhat pathetic outsider who had sacrificed personal connections for a precarious career in a distant city. The more I reflected, the more I recognized the sophisticated manipulation at work. Megan would praise me in one breath. Archer is so smart with computers, and undermine me in the next, though I worry all those hours staring at screens is why he can't maintain relationships. She would thank me for gifts to her children, then imply to others that they were an attempt to buy affection I couldn't earn naturally. Most painful was the realization that I'd enabled this treatment through my own desire to maintain family harmony. After losing our parents, Megan and her children represented my only real family connection. I tolerated the disrespect, absorbed the financial burden, and swallowed my pride, all to preserve a relationship that, in reality, existed only on her exploitative terms. The incident with Tyler pointing at my car was simply the most public manifestation of a pattern that had existed for nearly a decade. The snickers around the dinner table confirmed what I'd suspected, but been unwilling to face. Everyone in Megan's circle had accepted her fictional narrative about my life. My own accomplishments had been twisted into a story that diminished rather than celebrated my success. As dawn broke over the hotel parking lot, I made a decision. The pattern would end now. No more money, no more silent acceptance of disrespect, no more allowing Megan's insecurity to define my relationship with my niece and nephew. It was time for the truth, delivered not with anger, but with the calm certainty of someone who finally recognizes their own worth. The morning after the disastrous dinner, I sat in my hotel room with a cup of mediocre coffee, watching the sunrise and formulating a plan. My first instinct had been emotional. Cut ties completely, walk away, never look back. But that approach would only reinforce whatever narrative Megan would inevitably construct about my departure from their lives. I needed to be strategic, methodical, and above all, factual in my response. I opened my laptop and began creating a spreadsheet documenting every financial contribution I'd made to Megan and Brad over the years. Bank transfers for their mortgage payments, 81 of them at $900 each. The $15,000 wire transfer for Brad's business venture. The $8,000 check for their roof repair. Countless smaller expenses. Birthdays, Christmas gifts, Tyler's baseball equipment, Emma's dance lessons, the family vacation to Disney World, I'd largely funded, but been unable to attend due to work commitments. The total was staggering, nearly $3,000 over 8 years. Not loans, not investments, gifts I'd never expected to be repaid. Money given out of love and familial obligation, transformed by Megan's lies into evidence of my dependence rather than my generosity. Next, I pulled up my employment history, offer letters, promotion announcements, performance reviews, stock option grants, documentation of my actual career trajectory rather than Megan's fictional account of it. I downloaded statements showing my investment portfolio, retirement accounts, and the recent purchase agreement for my Tesla, all paid in full, no financing involved. While compiling these materials, I noticed a new email from Brad's brother James. "Hey, sorry about last night. Can we talk before you leave town?" I suggested meeting for breakfast at my hotel. An hour later, James arrived looking uncomfortable, but determined. "That was pretty awful," he said after ordering coffee. "Sarah and I were talking about it all night. We had no idea Megan had been, well, saying those things about you." "How long has it been going on?" I asked quietly. James sighed, running a hand through his thinning hair. "Years, I guess. At first, it was just little comments about how you were struggling to find your footing in Seattle. Then gradually, it evolved into this whole narrative about how she was helping support you while you tried to establish yourself. And you believed her?" His expression was pained. "I should have questioned it more. The stories never quite aligned with what I could see of your life, but Megan was always so convincing. She'd show us texts from you thanking her for help, talk about how you called her for advice on financial matters. Those texts were thanking her for forwarding my mail, I explained. The financial discussions were me offering to help them, not the other way around. James nodded slowly. I'm starting to see that now. Look, Archer, I feel terrible. What can I do to help fix this? His sincerity was touching, but the situation required more than one ally's support. Just tell the truth if it comes up, I replied. I'm going to address this directly. After James left, I called Dr. Rivera, the therapist I'd been seeing in Seattle, to work through lingering grief about our parents and navigate the complexities of my relationship with Megan. This was bound to happen eventually, Dr. Rivera said after I recounted the dinner incident. What's important now is that you establish clear boundaries while taking care of your emotional health. I'm planning to confront her, I explained. Not emotionally, but with documentation of everything. The money, my career, all of it. That approach makes sense, but prepare yourself for defensive reactions, he cautioned. People who've created false narratives often respond to truth with even more elaborate deceptions. The key is to remain grounded in facts, while accepting that some relationships may be permanently altered by this confrontation. Next, I called Jessica, my financial advisor in Seattle. I've been telling you for years that your support of your sister's family was excessive, she reminded me. From a purely financial perspective, ending these payments is long overdue. That money should be going toward your own goals, the home purchase you've been planning, the startup idea you've been developing. I know, I acknowledged. Family obligations are complicated. They are, she agreed. But financial boundaries are part of healthy family dynamics. I'm sending you a summary of what those contributions would have amounted to if invested over the same period. Seeing the opportunity cost might strengthen your resolve. The document she sent was sobering. Had I invested that $73,000 rather than giving it to Megan and Brad, it would have grown to nearly $110,000 given market performance over the same period. My next call was to my boss, Catherine, explaining that I needed to extend my time in Michigan by 2 days to handle a family matter. Take whatever time you need, she said. The team has the launch under control. Family comes first. The irony of her statement wasn't lost on me. I'd been putting family first for years, just not in a way that served either Megan or myself in the long run. By enabling her behavior, I'd become complicit in it. By mid-afternoon, I had formulated a comprehensive plan. Rather than an emotional confrontation or public exposure, I would request a family meeting with everyone who had been present at dinner. I would present the facts calmly and clearly, then establish new boundaries moving forward. I spent the rest of the day preparing for various scenarios. If Megan denied everything, I had documentation. If she became emotional, I would remain calm. If Brad became confrontational, I would redirect to facts rather than engaging with anger. My goal wasn't to punish or embarrass them, but to end the cycle of deception and exploitation. That evening I texted Megan, "We need to have a family meeting tomorrow. Everyone who was at dinner should be there. I'll come by at 2. Her response was immediate and defensive. "What's this about? We have plans tomorrow." "Change them," I replied. "This is important." After a long pause, "Fine, but I don't understand why you're being so dramatic." I didn't respond further. The time for explaining myself was over. Tomorrow would be about truth, uncomfortable, long overdue truth. Sunday afternoon arrived with a clarity of purpose I hadn't felt in years. I'd slept soundly for the first time since arriving in Michigan, awakening with the certainty that regardless of the outcome, confronting Megan's deception was necessary for my own self-respect and for any possibility of authentic relationship moving forward. I dressed deliberately in a casual but professional manner, dark jeans, a light blue button-down shirt, and the watch our father had left me. Nothing flashy that could reinforce Megan's narrative of me showing off, but nothing that undermined the success I'd legitimately earned. The weather had turned, with a steady spring rain replacing yesterday's sunshine, fitting for the conversation ahead. I arrived at Megan and Brad's house precisely at 2 o'clock, carrying a leather portfolio containing printouts of all the documentation I'd compiled. Megan opened the door before I could ring the bell, her expression a mixture of annoyance and apprehension. She'd clearly put effort into her appearance, hair freshly styled, makeup carefully applied, dressed in an expensive-looking sweater and jeans that projected casual affluence. "I still don't understand why this couldn't wait until your next visit," she said by way of greeting, stepping aside to let me enter. "You've completely disrupted our Sunday." "Some things shouldn't wait," I replied evenly. "Is everyone here?" She nodded reluctantly. "In the living room. The kids are at Brad's parents' house." The arrangement of people in the living room spoke volumes. Brad sat in what was clearly his usual armchair, positioned slightly apart from his parents on the sofa. James and Sarah had taken seats at the far end of the room, their body language suggesting discomfort with the situation. All conversation stopped as I entered. "Thank you all for making time for this," I began, remaining standing as Megan took a seat beside Brad. "I know it's unexpected, but after what happened at dinner last night, there are some things that need to be clarified." "If this is about what Tyler said," Megan interjected quickly, "we've already explained to him that he misunderstood. Children exaggerate. You know how it is." "This isn't just about Tyler," I replied calmly. "It's about a pattern that's been going on for years, one that I've allowed to continue for too long." I opened my portfolio and removed the first document, a summary of all financial contributions I'd made to Megan and Brad's household. "For the past 8 years, I've provided significant financial support to Megan and Brad," I explained, handing copies of the summary to everyone in the room. "Nearly $73,000 in total, including 81 monthly mortgage payments of $900 each." Brad's father Howard looked up sharply from the paper, his expression transitioning from dismissive to attentive. "What's this about, Megan?" he asked, turning to my sister. "It's not what it looks like," Megan replied, her voice rising slightly. "Archer's always been generous with gifts, but he's making it sound like we've been taking advantage." "I'm not making accusations," I interrupted gently. "I'm simply stating facts. The money was freely given. That's not the issue. The issue is that I've recently learned that my financial support has been mischaracterized to all of you. I've been told that some of you believe I've been financially dependent on Megan and Brad, when the opposite is true." "That's ridiculous," Brad sputtered, his face flushing. "We never said—" "I have texts and emails," I continued, removing another document from my portfolio. Messages from Megan to various family members describing loans she supposedly made to me, references to her helping me through tough times, statements about my career being unstable. I handed these to James, who looked through them with growing discomfort before passing them to Sarah. "These are from our group chat," Sarah said quietly, looking at Megan. "You told us you were helping Archer with rent when his hours were cut last year." She turned to me. "Were your hours cut?" "No," I replied. "I received a promotion and a 20% raise last February. I've never had my hours reduced. I've never been in financial distress. I've never borrowed money from Megan or Brad." The room fell silent as this information sank in. Judith, who had been watching carefully, reached for the papers in her husband's hand. "What about the business loan?" she asked, referencing the $15,000 I'd given Brad. "You told us Archer had borrowed money from your inheritance and was paying it back." Before Megan could respond, I removed another document, a copy of the wire transfer with the memo line clearly reading, "Gift, business expansion." There was no loan, I explained. When Brad wanted to open the second dealership location, I gave them $15,000 as a gift. The same applies to the $8,000 for their roof replacement 2 years ago, and countless other expenses I've covered over the years. Brad stood suddenly, his expression darkening. "We never asked for handouts," he snapped. "If you've been keeping score all these years, maybe you shouldn't have offered in the first place." "I'm not keeping score," I replied, maintaining my calm demeanor. "I gave freely because I love this family. I'm only showing you these documents now because I need everyone to understand the reality of our financial relationship." I turned to address everyone. "I've worked incredibly hard for my success. I put myself through college, working 3 jobs simultaneously. I've earned every promotion through dedication and skill. The Tesla in the driveway is mine, purchased outright with cash from my recent performance bonus. I'm not showing off or pretending to be something I'm not. Megan had been growing increasingly agitated, and now she stood, tears welling in her eyes. So this is what it's about? You want to humiliate me in front of everyone because your feelings were hurt? Because a 7-year-old said something silly at dinner? No, I said softly. This is about truth. For years you've created a fictional narrative about my life, one where I'm struggling, pretending, or somehow less successful than I actually am. You've told your children, your in-laws, and even our mutual friends that I borrow cars to impress people, that I live beyond my means, that I need your financial support. None of that is true, and it needs to stop. Why would she do that? Howard asked, looking genuinely confused. James cleared his throat. I think I understand, he said carefully. If Archer was struggling, it would be easier to explain why Megan and Brad needed his financial help while simultaneously dismissing his life choices. It can't be both ways. Either he's successful enough to provide substantial support, or he's failing and needs their help. The narrative has to be consistent. Megan collapsed back into her seat, tears now flowing freely. You don't understand what it's like, she said, her voice breaking. You left. You went to college, built a fancy career, moved to a glamorous city. Do you know what happened to me? I got pregnant, married young, and stayed in the same town doing the same things with the same people forever. I never judged your choices, I replied gently. You didn't have to, she cried. Your life judges mine every day. Every promotion, every trip you take, every success you have, reminds me of everything I gave up. And yes, I've been jealous and resentful. Is that what you want me to admit? Brad moved to her side, placing a hand on her shoulder that she immediately shrugged off. And you, she turned on him, you were happy enough to take his money while laughing behind his back about how he thinks he's better than us. You encouraged me. Brad's face reddened. That's not fair, Megan. You're the one who told everyone he was struggling. You're the one who said his job wasn't secure. I just went along with what you told me. The room descended into uncomfortable silence as the extent of the deception became clear to everyone. Judith looked between her son and daughter-in-law with an expression of growing disappointment. Howard stared at his hands. James and Sarah exchanged glances that communicated their discomfort. I didn't come here to create division or place blame, I said finally. I came to establish truth and set boundaries moving forward. I won't be contributing to your mortgage or other expenses anymore. Not because I'm angry, but because it's created an unhealthy dynamic between us. So you're cutting us off completely? Megan asked, a note of panic entering her voice. Just like that? I'm ending financial support that's been misrepresented and taken for granted, I clarified. I'm still your brother. I still want to be part of Tyler and Emma's lives. But moving forward, our relationship needs to be based on mutual respect and honesty. And if we need help? Brad asked, his tone somewhere between defensive and concerned. Then we can discuss it openly and honestly, I replied. But no more monthly payments. No more expecting me to cover emergencies or extras without acknowledgement. And absolutely no more diminishing my career or success to make yourselves feel better. I gathered my documents, returning them to the portfolio. I'll be leaving for Seattle tomorrow morning. I've said what I needed to say. What happens next is up to all of you. As I turned to leave, James stood. I'll walk you out. In the foyer, away from the others, he spoke quietly. That took courage. For what it's worth, Sarah and I should have questioned Megan's stories more carefully. The inconsistencies were there if we'd been paying attention. It's not your responsibility, I assured him. We all believed what we wanted to believe. What now? He asked. Will you cut contact completely? I shook my head. That's not what I want. But real relationships can't be built on lies and manipulation. The ball is in their court now. As I drove away from the house, a complex mixture of emotions washed over me. Relief at having finally spoken my truth, sadness for the pain it had caused, uncertainty about what would remain of my relationship with my sister and her family. But beneath it all was a foundation of self-respect that had been missing for too long. The immediate aftermath of the confrontation unfolded in ways both expected and surprising. I returned to my hotel room emotionally drained, but with the clarity that comes from finally addressing long-suppressed truths. I ordered room service, answered some work emails, and tried to process the events of the day. Around 8 that evening, my phone buzzed with a text from Megan. "You've always been so judgmental. I hope you're satisfied with yourself for destroying this family." I didn't respond. Classic projection, accusing me of the very thing she had done through years of deception. Dr. Rivera had warned me about this defensive reaction, and engaging would only fuel the fire. 15 minutes later, Brad called. When I answered, his voice was tight with controlled anger. "You could have addressed this privately with us," he said without preamble. "Did you have to embarrass Megan in front of my entire family?" "The deception wasn't private," I replied calmly. "The narrative about me was shared with everyone. The correction needed to be equally comprehensive. My parents are questioning everything now," he continued. "Dad's talking about financial responsibility, and Mom's asking how we could have accepted so much money from you while—" He trailed off. "While what?" I prompted. A heavy sigh came through the line. "While saying the things we said. Look, I know how it appears, but you have to understand Megan's position. She's built her whole identity around being successful here, being the one who made the right choices. Your success threatens that narrative." "My success is the result of my choices and hard work," I pointed out. "It doesn't diminish hers unless she allows it to." "Easy for you to say," he muttered. "Anyway, I didn't call to argue. I wanted to ask about the mortgage payment. Were you serious about stopping it completely? We've built our budget around that money." The audacity was still breathtaking. "Yes, I was serious. You've had 81 payments from me. That's $72,900 toward a house I don't live in. It's more than enough. We can't just adjust our budget overnight," he protested. "At least give us a few months to—" "No," I interrupted firmly. "The payments stop now. You make a good living at the dealership, Brad. You and Megan need to live within your means." The line went silent for several seconds before he responded with a cold, "Fine. Don't expect to see much of the kids then." The threat hit its intended target. Tyler and Emma were innocent in all this, and the thought of losing my relationship with them was painful. But I recognized the manipulation tactic for what it was. "Using the children as leverage is beneath you," I said quietly. "Think about what that teaches them." He hung up without responding. I was just preparing for bed when another knock came at my hotel room door. Looking through the peephole, I was surprised to see Tyler standing there with James behind him. I opened the door immediately. "What's going on?" James looked apologetic. "Tyler overheard some of the conversation after you left. He was really upset and insisted on seeing you. I hope that's okay. I texted Megan that he's with me." Tyler launched himself at me in a fierce hug. "I'm sorry, Uncle Archer. I didn't mean to make everyone mad." I knelt to his level, returning the hug. "Hey, buddy, you didn't do anything wrong. Grown-ups sometimes have complicated disagreements that have nothing to do with you." "But everyone was yelling after you left," he said, his voice small. "Mommy was crying, and Grandma kept saying she was disappointed." Dad slammed the door and drove away. I led him to sit on the edge of the bed while James leaned against the wall, giving us some space. "Tyler, listen to me," I said, looking directly into his eyes. "None of this is your fault. What you said at dinner just brought some grown-up issues into the open that needed to be discussed. But Mommy said I embarrassed her by repeating private things. Adults shouldn't tell children things they don't want repeated," I explained gently. "You were just being honest, which is exactly what you should always do." He considered this for a moment. "Is it true that you bought your car yourself? Mom said you were just pretending." "Yes, I bought it myself," I confirmed. "I work very hard at my job, and sometimes I'm able to buy nice things because of that hard work." "Cool," he said, his demeanor brightening slightly. "Can we still go for a ride sometime?" "Absolutely," I promised, though unsure when that opportunity might actually arise given the current circumstances. "Anytime I'm visiting." After Tyler used the bathroom, James suggested they should head back. "Sarah's waiting in the car. We'll drop him at home." "Thank you for bringing him," I said sincerely. "It means a lot." "He was really worried about you," James replied. "And for what it's worth, Sarah and I talked with Howard and Judith after you left. They're processing a lot. This has been quite a revelation for them about Megan and Brad. After they left, I received a message from Sarah. James told me about Tyler's visit. Hope that was okay. Just wanted you to know we're here for you. This family stuff is messy, but you did the right thing. Let's stay in touch." Her support was unexpected but deeply appreciated. Perhaps something positive could emerge from this painful situation. Authentic relationships with family members who valued truth and respect. Around midnight, my phone rang again. Megan's name appeared on the screen. Against my better judgment, I answered. "How dare you fill Tyler's head with your version of events?" she began, her words slightly slurred, suggesting she'd been drinking. "He came home talking about how adults shouldn't tell kids to keep secrets, and how you really did buy your fancy car." "That's hardly a controversial statement, Megan," I replied wearily. "I did buy my own car, and adults shouldn't put children in the middle of their issues." "You've turned everyone against me," she continued, her tone shifting from angry to tearful. "My in-laws think I'm some kind of manipulative liar. Brad's barely speaking to me. Even James and Sarah are being weird." "I simply told the truth," I said. "If that's turned people against you, perhaps you should consider why." "You've always been so perfect," she spat, anger returning. "Perfect grades, perfect career, perfect life. Some of us make mistakes, Archer. Some of us have regrets. We can't all be as flawless as you." "I've never claimed to be perfect," I said quietly. "I've just worked hard and made different choices. And now you're punishing me for mine by cutting us off financially," she accused. "I'm ending an unhealthy pattern," I corrected. "That's not punishment, it's a boundary." The conversation continued in this circular pattern for several minutes, Megan alternating between angry accusations, tearful pleas, and attempts at manipulation. I maintained my calm, repeating my position without engaging with her emotional tactics. Finally, exhausted by the exchange, I ended the call with a simple, "I love you, Megan, but this conversation isn't productive. We can talk again when you're ready to discuss things honestly." The next morning, as I prepared to check out of the hotel, I received a text from Brad's father, Howard. "I owe you an apology. Had no idea about the financial situation. Inappropriate comments were made based on false information. Would like to speak when you have time." I called him from the airport while waiting for my flight. Our conversation was brief but significant. He expressed genuine regret for accepting Megan's portrayal of me without question and acknowledged the generosity I'd shown their family over the years. "Brad and Megan need to stand on their own feet," he concluded. "Judith and I enabled them too, in different ways. Perhaps this is the wake-up call they needed." On the flight back to Seattle, I reflected on how quickly the family system had recalibrated once the truth was exposed. Those who valued honesty, James, Sarah, eventually Howard and Judith, had adjusted their perceptions and reached out. Those who had benefited from the deception, Megan and Brad, were struggling to maintain their narrative in the face of overwhelming evidence. As the plane touched down in Seattle, I felt a strange mixture of sadness and liberation. The family I'd thought I had might never be the same, but perhaps something more authentic could eventually take its place. 6 months have passed since that fateful family dinner and the confrontation that followed. The journey from that painful weekend to today hasn't been linear, but it has been transformative in ways I never anticipated. The first few weeks after returning to Seattle were difficult. Megan alternated between angry texts, tearful phone calls, and periods of complete silence. Brad communicated only through terse messages about practical matters. Tyler and Emma sent me drawings and dictated messages through James and Sarah, who had become unexpected allies and bridges to the children during the estrangement from their parents. About a month after our confrontation, Megan called late one evening, her voice subdued and lacking the defensive edge that had characterized our previous conversations. "I've been seeing a therapist," she announced without preamble. She suggested I might have some issues with comparison and insecurity. It wasn't exactly an apology, but it was the first acknowledgement that her behavior might have deeper roots than simple misunderstanding. Our conversation that night was cautious but more honest than any we'd had in years. She didn't directly address the lies she'd told, but she did admit to feeling overwhelmed by jealousy when hearing about my career advancements. 2 weeks later, Brad reached out with a more direct approach. "I should have questioned Megan's stories about you more carefully," he admitted. "And I definitely shouldn't have gone along with them or repeated them to others. That was wrong, and I'm sorry." Their mortgage payment came due, and for the first time in nearly 7 years, they covered it entirely themselves. It wasn't easy for them. Brad took extra shifts at the dealership, and Megan found part-time work as an administrative assistant at the local community college. The adjustment to living within their actual means was challenging, but necessary for their growth and our relationship's healing. By the 3-month mark, we had established a new normal. I video chatted with Tyler and Emma weekly. Megan joined these calls occasionally, her initial awkwardness gradually giving way to more natural interaction. We carefully avoided any discussion of finances or my career, focusing instead on the children's activities and shared family memories. Howard and Judith underwent their own reckoning, recognizing how their emphasis on appearances and status had contributed to Megan's insecurities. They began making conscious efforts to celebrate achievements based on character and effort rather than material outcomes. Howard even called me specifically to proudly report that he'd congratulated Tyler on improving his reading skills rather than on winning a baseball game, a small but significant shift in his value system. My relationships with James and Sarah deepened considerably. What had been casual, holiday-only connections evolved into genuine friendship. They visited Seattle for a long weekend in August, and I showed them around the city I'd grown to love. Without Megan's distorted lens coloring their perception, they saw my life as it truly was, not extravagant or showy, but comfortable, fulfilling, and earned through consistent effort. The most profound changes, however, happened within me. Through continued work with Dr. Rivera, I examined the patterns that had allowed me to become entangled in such an unhealthy dynamic for so long. I recognized how my parents' death had intensified my desire to maintain family connections at any cost, how my childhood experiences with financial insecurity had made generosity a central value, and how my natural conflict avoidance had enabled Megan's manipulations to go unchallenged. I learned to establish healthy boundaries, not just with Megan, but in all my relationships. I practiced saying no without guilt and expressing my needs directly, rather than hoping others would intuit them. I began to see how my professional success had become a form of validation, driving me to work excessive hours and sacrifice personal relationships for career advancement. With this new awareness, I made significant changes in my own life. I reduced my working hours from 60 to a more reasonable 45 per week. I joined a local hiking group and made genuine friendships outside of work. I even started dating again after years of putting romance on the back burner. Nothing serious yet, but I'm open to possibilities in a way I wasn't before. Financially, I redirected the resources that had previously gone to supporting Megan's family. I purchased a modest but comfortable condo in a neighborhood I love. I increased my retirement contributions and established a separate investment account for future goals. I even set aside money for a proper vacation, my first in nearly a decade, planning a 2-week trip to Japan next spring. Last month, I returned to Michigan for Tyler's 8th birthday. The atmosphere was markedly different from previous visits. Megan greeted me with a genuine hug, rather than the perfunctory one I'd grown accustomed to. Brad shook my hand and met my eyes directly, the defensive posture notably absent. They proudly showed me their newly refinanced mortgage, at a lower interest rate, with payments they could manage independently. The most touching moment came when Tyler proudly showed me his science project, a model of the solar system he'd built entirely himself. "Uncle Archer, Mom said you might be able to help me understand how gravity works," he said. "She told me you're really smart about science stuff." It was a small thing, perhaps, but significant. Megan acknowledging my knowledge as valuable rather than threatening. A step toward seeing my abilities as resources to be shared rather than successes to be diminished. That evening, as we sat on the porch after the children had gone to bed, Megan spoke the words I'd waited years to hear. "I'm sorry, Archer. Truly sorry. I was so caught up in feeling like I'd failed at my own life that I couldn't celebrate yours. Instead of appreciating your generosity, I resented that you were in a position to be generous. that was wrong, and I'm working to be better. The apology wasn't perfect, and our relationship remains a work in progress. The trust that was broken will take years to fully rebuild. But in that moment, I recognized that the painful confrontation 6 months earlier had been necessary not just for my own self-respect, but for Megan's growth as well. The most profound lesson I've learned through this experience is that true generosity must include honesty. By avoiding difficult conversations to preserve harmony, I wasn't actually being kind. I was enabling destructive patterns that harmed everyone involved. Real love means caring enough to speak truth, establish boundaries, and hold others accountable. I've also learned that our worth isn't determined by how much we sacrifice for others, but by how authentically we live our values. My desire to help my sister was genuine, but my approach was flawed. True support empowers others rather than creating dependency. Today, I maintain my boundaries while keeping my heart open. I contribute to my niece and nephew's college funds rather than their parents' mortgage. I share my professional knowledge freely but no longer apologize for my success. I offer emotional support without financial bailouts. It's a healthier balance for everyone. If you're struggling with family members who diminish your achievements or take advantage of your generosity, remember that establishing boundaries isn't selfish. It's necessary for authentic relationships. Sometimes the greatest gift you can give someone is the opportunity to stand on their own feet and face reality honestly. Have you ever had to confront uncomfortable truths in your family? How did you handle it? Share your experience in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please hit the like button and subscribe to hear more stories about navigating complex family dynamics with integrity and compassion. Thank you for listening, and remember, the relationships that survive truth are the only ones worth keeping.